still looking at that gold arm. He sits down. He hadn't thought about his pipe. He's just sitting there. Looking at that gold, I got my gold. Yes, sir, buddy. New house, new clothes, wagon with 20 white horses. It's getting money. It's really, really dark outside now. Locks the door. This is getting really, maybe a storm's coming. I don't know what's going on. I better protect my gold. Then he hears as he's locking the door. Who's got my arm? Who's got my arm? He's shaking his head. He's not sure he's really hearing this. As I've said, I'm going to get a new house, some clothes, a new wagon with 20 white horses. Then he hears it again. Who's got my arm? Who's got my arm? He goes to the house. He doesn't see anything. He doesn't see anyone. He figures he better get to safety. He gets in his closet, closes the door, locks it. Still got his gold arm. The wind is picked up outside. You can still hear it blowing. It's getting stronger. You know, it's really dark, and it's dark in the closet. It's dark in the closet. Yeah, I'm safe. I'm all right. I got my gold. Then he hears the lock on the closet door turn. Who's got? The door opens. And the arm is taken, and out the window it goes, and he's standing there. And of course, he's wondering who's taken that golden arm. That's it. A promise broken.
They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together ooky, the Addams Family. Their house is a museum where people come to see them. They really are a scream, the Addams Family. Sweet, neat, petite, so get away, just crawl on a broomstick you can crawl on. We're gonna lay a call on the Addams Family.
Jim Caseta. Jim's an author and a construction engineer. But tonight he's going to tell us a story of seance secrets, a chilling tale of a disturbed patient.
It was 5 years ago, and the podcast that had hired me to do a few assignments gave me one that, frankly, I wasn't all that crazy about. When I got the assignment folder, it said they wanted me to cover a spiritualist community way over in Casadega, over in eastern Florida. I said, spiritualists? You mean like the people that read tea leaves and palms and tarot cards and crystal balls and all of that kind of stuff? I don't believe any of that crap. He said, well, it's your assignment, you can take it or leave it. So I said, okay, I'll take it. So my producer went ahead, made a reservation for me over there, and after about a 2.5-hour drive, I arrived in Casadega. It was late in the afternoon. It was about this time of year. It was getting dark, and it had rained earlier, and so there was kind of a fog in the area. And as I got out of my car, I looked around. You've got to be kidding me. This is a spiritualist camp? There's a bunch of little cottages, a couple of storefronts that look like they've been closed for years, and then there's this 2-story mission-style Spanish structure, must have been 100 years old. It said Casadega Inn. Casadega Inn, that's the place. So, you know, just the place gave me the creeps. These big old oak trees with Spanish moss hanging down all over the place. There was one street light that was flickering. It was dim. I said, well, I'm getting out of here. I'm heading to the hotel, and I got there, and it had an iron gate. This big archway, and I had to grab hold of the handle and got it rusted. And you could hear it squeaking on its rusty hinges. I said, well, this is a 5-star property, no question about it. And as I stepped through the archway, spider webs. Oh my God, get things off me. I'm brushing them off my clothes, and I'm watching these big brown hairy spiders going up the wall. I said, oh, this is a real treat. Can't wait to see the rest of the day works out. And I went in, and the reception desk was closed, but there was an envelope waiting for me to check in. I took the envelope and opened it up, and it had a receipt for the hotel room and a receipt for $250. I said, for the seance. You've got to be kidding me. People pay for this crap? But I took my room key, went up, dropped my stuff. A couple hours later, at the time the seance was supposed to begin, I walked out of the hotel down this path, following the instructions for that envelope. And I got to this little string of cottages, and they were strange little places. You know, they were kind of like the shotgun houses we got over here in Ybor City, except they had a room off the back of them. And when I researched this stuff, it said, these are the rooms where people get together to summon these dead spirits. Oh boy, here we go. Now, walked inside the cottage and went back to this little room, and I was ushered inside, and there were 5 people already in the room in this round table. And in the middle of the round table, there was a Ouija board and a feather and a postcard and a letter and a pen. So well, I don't know what that's all about. And about 5 minutes later, this bony-looking guy, he must have been 90 years old. He was like a frame with skin on it. And he had long white hair, and he had these black beady eyes that looked through you just like a laser. Kind of freaked me out, actually. Then I guessed he was the medium, and he introduced himself as such. And so, in the research I had done, I learned there's this thing called seance etiquette. And you're supposed to get around the table. And by the way, I let those 5 people sit around the table. I took a seat over in the corner. I didn't want to have anything to do with this gooey. And they sat at the table with their hands on the table, with their fingertips touching. And this medium guy, he sits down and he lights a little pot of incense, and the smoke starts rising up in the room. He said, okay, he's setting the mood. Get ready for the big surprise here. And then he gives some instructions to the people sitting around the table. And everybody closed their eyes. And he dimmed the lights. And he starts doing a chant. Apparently they were trying to commune with this fellow by the name of Colby, who in 1875 had founded this spiritualist camp over in Casadega. And apparently they were trying to have a conversation with him that night. Okay, let's see how this goes. And after the room was silent and the incense was in the air, I started watching the incense start to swirl around a little bit. And then the table started to vibrate a little bit. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, this is, some kind of vibrator mechanism underneath the table. I know how this thing works. And all that is probably a fan that's blowing the incense around. And this is some kind of, interesting sideshow act, but certainly nothing that's worthy of a news report. And as I was sitting over there in the corner, apparently, without realizing it, I had whispered something, not very loud. What a bunch of hooey this is. And the medium jumps up and he points at me and said, You have just disturbed the spirit. The spirit's angry with you. In the seance instructions, they said you never want to disturb the spirit because if you make the spirit angry, it will have its revenge on you. He said, you need to leave right now. I know when I'm not wanted. I got up, walked out of the room, closed the door behind me, and as I was walking back through the path to the hotel, I was feeling something crawling around on my back. I thought, some of those damn spiders again. Or maybe it's the bushes. It was kind of dark and, but it felt like fingers that were grasping at my arms. And when I got back to my hotel room, which was antique furniture, equipped hotel room, they had one of those big canopy beds on it. I was freaked out just enough by that experience. I said, I remember when I was growing up as a kid, there was this movie called 13 Ghosts. And in that movie, they had a canopy bed that was just like that. And it had some kind of mechanism where when a person was sleeping, the canopy would come down and smother the person in the middle of the night. Well, this has been a strange enough evening, and I wasn't going to take any chances. And fortunately, in my bathroom, they had a big old clawfoot tub. So I took a couple of pillows, fluffed them up, put them in a tub, and slept in the tub. And as I was nodding off to sleep, I was wondering, okay, apparently I've pissed off this spirit, and there's going to be some kind of revenge. I don't really believe this nonsense. I'm not going to take any chances. So the following morning, I checked myself out, got in my car, came back here to Tampa. And over the next couple of days, I recorded my podcast edition, and, I thought, well, that's the end of that. Well, the problem is, this podcast, some of you may have heard of it, called Stranger Things. It covers all kinds of bizarre experiences from all over the country. This was kind of a popular thing 5 years ago. And when I signed on with them, they had almost 1 million paid monthly subscribers. That was huge. Funny thing is, in less than 2 weeks, the number of paid subscribers dropped below 100. And the financials for that whole business just went away overnight. They shut down the website, and all of us lost our jobs. Now, if you ask me in public whether I believe in these people that read crystal balls and tarot cards and tea leaves, palms and things like that, I'll say, oh, that's a bunch of baloney. I gotta tell you, in my personal moments, and to my closest friends, I gotta tell you, I'm still not quite sure. Thank you.
I'm going to give the train just a second because it's going to get louder before it gets quieter. Our next storyteller this evening is a doctor. Dr. Mark Berger, who is a consulting physician and a geriatric specialist with his offices in Safety Harbor. We all know how scary doctors can be, right? And tonight, he's going to tell us the story of the anatomy lab and the secrets that that medical school lab holds.
Thank you. Okay, I'd like you to remember back a few years ago, we had a little problem, but at one of the medical schools, they had a more unusual problem. So every year there's a new class of medical students in their nice white coats, and they come in and they get told that for the next 4 years they're going to be in heck, and they're going to be working their tails off, and the classes are hard. And the hardest one is going to be anatomy, because it has the anatomy lab, a long, scary hall where you're going to go in there and cut up dead bodies. Well, no, actually, you're going to dissect cadavers that have been donated to science, and a few that the coroner didn't know what to do with, so he brought them over here. So the students managed to get ready, and they open the halls to the anatomy lab, and it's a long, cold room, granite, old, poorly lit fluorescent lights, old creaky windows that have drafts, and row after row of stainless steel tables with giant bags of them. And one of the medical students, we'll call him Joe, went in with the other students for the orientation, but a few of them had to go return their lunch. And eventually, after they came out of the bathroom, the preceptor came and said, now this is the anatomy lab, and you have to pay respect to these cadavers, because these are people who are donating themselves to science so that you can study and become really great doctors. And it is rumored, but nobody believes it, that there may be some ghosts in this hall that may have been attached to some of these cadavers in the past. So you better be on your best behavior. Now, Joe was not really paying much attention at this point, but he was thinking that he'll get through. He had a hard time in life. He was an orphan, and he put himself through college by taking wedding photography, and he was pretty good at it. He can pose people in the romantic wedding positions, and he took some art classes and some photography classes. But now he was in medical school, and he was going to make it through. And then the proctor also said, by the way, because it's such a hard class, if you get behind, we have makeup sessions where you can come in at night, we'll open the lab up, and you can resume your dissection of your cadavers. And, okay, so Joe and his three compatriots started doing their dissections, and they all got behind. It's very hard trying to identify nerves and things with the scalpels and doing it, and the book wasn't too helpful. So they would occasionally come in at night, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, spend a couple of hours in the lab trying to catch up on all their nerves that they were supposed to remember. And things were going pretty good. And Joe sort of noticed that after 9 o'clock there was nobody there. And he said, yeah, okay. But he decided, you know, these are sort of interesting things. I took a course in college in macro photography where we take pictures of close-up things, really interesting things like insects and things. And, you know, this might be an interesting subject matter. I don't think anybody's taken macro photography of bodies. Joe was a little unusual. So Joe brought his camera in one day, and when the last other student had left, he took his camera out and started taking some sort of tasteful macro pictures, closes up of knuckles or maybe fingers or an earlobe. Now, the spirits of the anatomy lab were not amused by this behavior. So they gave Joe some warnings. There were flickerings of the lights as he was taking pictures. There was weird sounds, clinks off in the distance, like medical instruments falling. There were gushes of wind through the leaky windows. But Joe kept on taking his pictures and went home, and the spirits were not sure what to do next. So the next time Joe came in, he brought his camera. He was getting a little braver this time. So he started taking less artsy and more pictures of different parts of the cadavers. The spirits were not amused. So they got together and they gave Joe COVID illness. So Joe was sick, along with a few other students. And with COVID, you had to stay out for 10 days and you were sick and you couldn't do much of anything. So Joe got out of school for 10 days and got behind. And he could do most of his other classes online with the computers and read the books and watch the Zooms. But the anatomy lab is hard to do unless you're actually there. So he had to go back to catch up 2 weeks worth of the anatomy lab with those dead bodies and the cadavers and the spirits. And for a while he was a good boy, but then the urge came over him. And again, some nights he stayed so late he was the last one in the lab. And out came his camera, and out took some pictures. And the spirits were not amused again. So they got together and they gave Joe long COVID. So now Joe not only was sick, he was tired, he was fatigued, he had brain fog, he had a hard time breathing, and the dean called him in and said, Joe, that's it. You're not going to make it through medical school this way. Why don't you take the rest of the year off and we'll see you next year? Well, all right, I'm going to be sick for a while. So Joe took the year off, but he remembered that nobody was in the lab after 9, 10 o'clock. So the urge came over him, and once again he brought his camera into the lab, because it really wasn't locked. And he took his camera out, and now he started posing the bodies. He used to be a wedding photographer, so he's good at posing them. But he posed them in ways that weren't quite so nice, like the classic Venus de Milo, or the fig leaf, or he even occasionally had them flashing at the bird. The spirits were not amused again, and they got together and said, this has got to stop forever. So they gave Joe COVID pneumonia. And Joe got really sick, and he went into the medical school hospital and was in the intensive care unit on the machines and did not make it. So Joe departed the mortal veil after 3 weeks. And that was the end of Joe, the medical student, who was a little bit artistic and unusual. Fast forward 9 months later, there's a new class of medical students coming into the orientation. And again, they're scared of the anatomy lab because they hear there are ghosts in there. And they get told the same thing, that they have to respect the bodies because this is a sacred trust. Bodies that were donated by people, and occasionally the coroner didn't know what to do with them. And this time they all paid attention. So they went into the lab, and 4 of them went to their cadaver, and they zipped open the bag, and there in the formaldehyde stench was this really fairly young-looking person. And they said, boy, he could be our age. I wonder what he died from. Well, we'll find out by the end of the season as we get done dissecting him. But he has this horrible look of terror on his face, and he's so wasted. What could do this to such a young, previously healthy person? And they didn't know, but the spirits in the anatomy lab, especially the newest spirit, did know.
Well, our fire is starting to burn, and we've reached our final storyteller. And our final teller this evening is Ross TARR, the founder of SUNCOAST Storytellers, the gentleman that's responsible for bringing all of these wonderful storytellers here to us tonight. By the way, Ross is also the personal biographer for Santa Claus. And I have it on good authority that the big man at the North Pole already has his invitation to the first of our Holiday Classics series later this year. But tonight, Ross is going to tell us a story that happened just over the river there. A story of the curator of Plant Hall.
Campers! Hello, campers and honored guests. About a week ago, I ran into an old friend. He's a biographer. And he does stories about people of importance in the Tampa Bay area. And he had started a new book on Henry Plant. And we all know Henry Plant built the hotel that now houses the University of Tampa. And he's one of these writers who likes to have the right environment. So he had been working for about 6 months, acquiring all of his notes, getting everything together, getting all of his information. But when he starts the final outline for his book, he likes to go on site. And so he went to the great hall of the old hotel at UT. He put up his easel, which is what he likes to do to form a story there. He opened both briefcases. He took out all of his huge pile of notes and a couple of little books, and he's putting everything together, and he's putting up a note. First he slaps up one note that says, Henry Plant, born 1819, to a affluent family in New England. Farmers. He received an excellent education, and when it came time for him to go to college. His grandmother wanted to send him to Yale to be a minister, but he wanted a life of adventure. Slapped up another note on the easel. About that time, the curator came through. And he said, you know, I honestly thought the curator dressed in that costume of Henry Plant looked a lot more like Mark Twain. But he went on with his work because the curator simply ignored him and moved on. He went to the next notes and it showed that young Henry had worked his way. Once he had decided not to go to the university, he had decided that he would silently be a cabin boy. He would learn the shipping industry from the steamboats. He learned how to handle the express industry. He became a rising star as a young man, and he married his old youthful sweetheart. He was promoted up through the lines, he went to the express companies, and eventually he and his wife moved to Atlanta, where he was heading up a huge express shipping railroad industry operation. And his wife died. The Civil War was also just starting. Now, the owners of the shipping company realized that the Confederacy would grab up their railroads and their ships. And so they, thinking ahead, bailed out by selling it all to Henry Plant on a promissory note. The Civil War rose and rose and rose. Violence was everywhere, and Henry, being no fool, went to Europe as an American tourist and lived well through the war, and then finally sneaked back in through Canada. After the war, he returned to Atlanta. He started acquiring every bankrupt ship line, every bankrupt railroad, every bankrupt express company he could get his hands on. He made a vast fortune, and 12 years after his wife had died, mid-50s, Henry finally felt lonely. So he went to New York and he found a 28-year-old socialite from an affluent family. Brought her back to Georgia. Together, they enjoyed a life of vast wealth, of acquiring more and more steamship lines, more and more railroads. He put a railroad into Tampa, Florida. He ran his steamboats into Tampa, Florida. He made it the place for the rich and famous to spend their winters. They would come to the great hotel where they would change clothes 3 times a day for each